I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
Windsor Castle had hosted dinners through family feuds, political storms, and private heartbreak. But this one ended differently. A sudden outburst from Queen Camilla shattered the evening. Princess Charlotte broke into tears, and Catherine made a decision nobody at the table expected. She stopped the dinner immediately. Chairs went still, conversations died, and in one explosive moment, what had begun as a private family gathering became a confrontation about boundaries, loyalty, and who would protect the next generation. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Catherine had entered the Windsor dinner determined to keep the evening calm. Prince William sat nearby, King Charles watched the table, and Camilla carried an uneasiness that had been building before anyone took their seat. Windsor Castle, one of the monarch's principal royal residences, often hosts official duties and family gatherings. This dinner was the latter. Senior aides remained outside the immediate dining room, leaving no formal buffer if tempers rose. Every word now belonged to the family alone, and every reaction would be impossible to hide behind ceremony. Camilla suddenly erupted. Her frustration broke through the careful tone of the evening, and Charlotte froze before lowering her eyes. Catherine noticed the tears immediately. The Princess of Wales, the title held by the wife of the heir to the throne, stopped worrying about royal composure in that instant. She pushed back her chair, moved toward her daughter, and told her they were leaving. Camilla tried to speak again, but the mother in front of her was no longer negotiating. Charles remained seated, stunned, while the Queen Consort began to understand that Catherine would not soften the moment to protect appearances. William stood seconds later. He placed his napkin beside an untouched plate and said quietly, "That is enough." The prince did not shout, yet the sentence carried more force than another argument. He moved beside Catherine, making his position unmistakable. Charlotte stayed close to her mother, while her father refused to let the discussion continue around her. Catherine then looked back toward Camilla and made the boundary clear. Her daughter would never again be expected to remain, while adults lost control around her. The message was personal and final for that night. Charles finally acted. He asked everyone except Camilla to leave him alone with her. The king's voice was controlled, but the request changed the evening. Catherine had stopped the dinner to protect Charlotte, but behind that instinctive decision stood 4 adults carrying different fears, and by midnight, each would understand that the family had crossed a line it could not simply uncross. The most dangerous royal conflicts are rarely about protocol alone. They are about family. Catherine saw a frightened daughter. William saw a boundary crossed. Charles saw his household beginning to fracture before him. And Camilla saw something equally terrifying: the possibility that one emotional outburst had permanently altered how the future king and queen viewed her. Yet at the center of every adult calculation stood Charlotte, still shaken by words she had never expected to hear. Catherine moved away from the shattered dinner with only one concern left in her mind. Inside a private sitting room, she knelt beside Charlotte and pulled her close, telling her again and again that she had done nothing wrong. The Princess of Wales, the title traditionally held by the wife of the heir to the throne, carried enormous public responsibility, but none of that mattered beside her daughter's tears. Charlotte struggled to understand why the adults had become angry, and her mother refused to let royal discipline turn that confusion into guilt. William entered moments later and stopped when he saw them together. His anger did not explode. It hardened. The prince understood the impossible position before him. Charles was his father and sovereign, but Catherine and their children were his immediate responsibility. That distinction mattered because the future king could respect the crown while still refusing to expose his family to another emotional confrontation. Catherine looked up at him and immediately recognized the controlled silence. He was no longer reacting to one bad dinner. He was deciding what would never be allowed to happen again. Camilla faced a very different silence. She remained alone after Charles left the dining room, turning her wedding ring slowly, while an untouched glass sat beside her. Nobody returned to reassure her. Nobody told her the evening would simply be forgotten by morning. The Queen Consort finally understood that Catherine's departure had changed more than the mood of one gathering. William had followed, Charlotte had cried, and Charles himself had walked away without defending what had happened. Charles sought out his son before the night was over. In a private conversation with no aides present, the king admitted that Camilla's reaction had crossed a personal boundary. He asked William not to make an irreversible judgment while emotions were still raw, insisting that one terrible moment should not automatically destroy years of family ties. William listened, but his answer carried a warning his father had not expected. "This did not start tonight," William said. He reminded Charles that Catherine had already warned him about an earlier confrontation involving Charlotte. The future king's words changed everything. Windsor had exposed the damage, but it had not created it. Weeks earlier, one smaller encounter had planted the resentment that finally exploded across the dinner table, and Catherine had seen the danger coming before anyone else was ready to believe her. Long before the dinner collapsed, Catherine had already sensed trouble. It began during a smaller royal gathering, when a seemingly ordinary disagreement over Charlotte's role at a family ceremony became unexpectedly personal. The exchange lasted only minutes, but Catherine never forgot the tone, Camilla never forgot the resistance, and William never forgot the warning his wife gave him afterward. Looking back, that conversation was the point of no return. The moment private irritation hardened into something far more dangerous. Catherine had been growing more protective of George, Charlotte, and Louis, as their public roles slowly expanded. She understood that royal children would eventually face ceremonies, formal dinners, and intense expectations, but she wanted that exposure controlled. A formal reception, meaning an official gathering where senior royals meet guests under strict protocol, could last for hours and demand constant composure. Camilla saw that pressure differently. She believed younger members of the family needed to learn the discipline of royal life gradually, even when the experience became uncomfortable. 3 weeks before the Windsor dinner, that difference exploded during a private afternoon planning meeting. Camilla told Catherine that Charlotte should remain through an upcoming family reception from beginning to end, even if she became tired or uneasy. The Queen Consort framed it as preparation for future duty. Catherine refused immediately. She made clear that no ceremonial expectation would outrank her judgment as a mother. Camilla heard something else in that refusal. To her, the answer sounded like a rejection of her experience and standing inside the family. Catherine felt the pressure become personal. She believed Camilla had crossed from offering advice into interfering with a decision about her child. The exchange remained controlled, but neither woman backed down. Charlotte's name sat at the center of every sentence. Camilla insisted she was thinking about the young princess's future. Catherine answered that preparing a child for royal life did not mean forcing her to endure situations that felt wrong. The disagreement ended without resolution, and that unfinished anger followed both women out of the room. Catherine went straight to William afterward. She closed the door of his study, waited until they were alone, and said quietly, "This cannot happen around Charlotte again." The prince understood immediately that his wife was not complaining about a minor disagreement. She was warning him that a boundary had been tested. William promised to take it seriously, and Catherine believed the matter would now be contained. Charles later learned about the clash through a private documented account from a household aide who had recorded the meeting summary. He chose not to intervene, convinced the tension would cool naturally. The king would later regret that choice. At Windsor, Camilla returned to the exact same argument with Charlotte, only feet away, and 3 weeks of resentment finally reached the table. This time, Catherine had no intention of answering quietly. Catherine did not raise her voice first. That made what happened next even more powerful. with Charlotte crying beside her and the room frozen in disbelief. The Princess of Wales faced Camilla directly and drew a boundary that had never before been spoken so openly inside their family. The argument was no longer about etiquette or authority. It was about a child. And Catherine made it brutally clear that no crown, marriage, or palace hierarchy would change her response. Camilla had returned to the old disagreement with a sharpness nobody expected. She accused Catherine of shielding Charlotte whenever royal expectations became uncomfortable, insisting that the young princess could not be protected from every difficult moment. Royal hierarchy, the system that places family members in different levels of duty and rank, usually shaped how disagreements were handled. But Catherine was no longer thinking about rank. She was watching her daughter struggle to hold back tears, while an argument about her future unfolded only feet away. Charles tried to stop it. The king interrupted once, then again, urging everyone to lower their voices, but the pace of the exchange had already outrun him. Charlotte looked down. Catherine saw the change immediately. She stood, moved between her daughter and the table, and faced Camilla with a calm that felt more dangerous than anger. "You will not speak like this in front of my daughter." The queen consort answered quickly that her words had never been directed at Charlotte personally. Catherine did not accept the distinction. The child had heard them. That was enough. William made his choice without a speech. He moved away from Charles and stood beside Catherine. The prince could have remained between both sides, but he did not. His position told everyone in the room where his loyalty rested. Camilla noticed. So did the king. William then looked toward Charlotte and saw exactly what his wife had seen moments earlier. A child trapped inside an adult dispute she had no power to escape. Catherine pulled Charlotte's chair back herself and took her hand. The dinner was over for their family. Camilla tried to explain, saying months of feeling pushed aside had built into frustration she could no longer contain. She believed William and Catherine were gradually shutting her out of decisions involving the younger royals, and that fear had finally broken through. Yet the explanation came too late. Catherine had heard enough, and the future king was no longer interested in debating motives while his daughter was distressed. Charles watched his son leave without looking back. He understood then that an apology might repair hurt, but it would not automatically restore trust. Catherine had won the confrontation by walking away. But once William began deciding what happened next, the family dispute moved from emotion into power. William did not issue threats. He did something more consequential. He became precise. By the following morning, the future king had reduced the chaos of the Windsor dinner to one simple principle. His children would never again be placed inside an adult royal dispute. Charles understood the message immediately. Camilla did too. What had looked like a painful family argument was now producing real boundaries, and William intended to enforce them regardless of whose feelings were hurt. William met Charles privately the next morning and spoke with unusual care. The prince knew he could not control every part of his father's marriage or household, but he and Catherine did control decisions involving George, Charlotte, and Louis. That mattered, because future family dinners, private visits, and shared gatherings depended on one basic condition: the Wales children had to feel safe. The royal household, meaning the family's private staff and working structure around official and personal duties, could manage schedules and appearances, but it could not override a parent's decision about a child. Charles listened without interrupting. William told him that Charlotte would not return to another intimate gathering with Camilla until Catherine believed the atmosphere had genuinely changed. The king felt the weight from two directions at once. As a grandfather, he understood why his son was protecting the child. As a husband, he knew the queen consort would hear the same decision as a personal rejection. Charles wanted peace between both sides, but William made clear that peace could not be purchased by asking Catherine to ignore what had happened. Charles slowly removed his reading glasses and placed them on the desk. "Are you punishing Camilla?" he asked. William answered without hesitation. "No, I'm protecting Charlotte." The distinction landed hard. The future king was not demanding humiliation, exile, or public consequences. He was drawing a private boundary around his family. Charles understood that this made the decision harder to challenge, because William was not acting from revenge. He was acting from responsibility. William then went further. Catherine would decide when direct contact with Camilla resumed. The prince trusted his wife to judge whether an apology carried real change or only regret over the consequences. Charles realized what that meant immediately. The queen could not bypass Catherine through him. She could not ask the king to restore normality by instruction. Any reconciliation would have to be earned directly from the woman who had walked Charlotte out of the room. Camilla received the message later that morning. Anger did not come first. Disbelief did. She tried to contact Catherine, but there was no immediate response. For the first time since the dinner, she understood that saying sorry would not automatically restore her place, and the silence from Catherine soon became more painful than the confrontation itself. Palace arguments are often hidden by schedules, ceremonies, and smiling appearances. This time, the consequences were felt in absence. A planned family tea disappeared from the calendar. Charlotte stayed close to her parents. Catherine offered no rushed reconciliation. And Camilla, suddenly confronted with the damage of her own outburst, discovered that there was no royal mechanism capable of forcing forgiveness. The quiet after Windsor became heavier than the shouting had been, because everyone finally had time to remember exactly what Charlotte had seen. Catherine focused on restoring normality around Charlotte. She and William kept the child's routine steady, refusing to let one terrible dinner become the center of family life. The prince supported that choice, because the real danger was no longer the argument itself, but the possibility that their daughter might begin connecting royal gatherings with fear. Charles understood that risk as well. The king quietly instructed the wider royal household, meaning the network of staff supporting the family's public and private duties, not to turn the rupture into gossip or competing camps. Camilla struggled with the silence differently. She recorded a short personal message for Catherine, stopped halfway through, deleted it, and began again. The queen consort tried to explain that she had never intended to hurt Charlotte, but each version sounded weaker than what the moment demanded. Finally, she put the phone aside. A spoken apology delivered through a device suddenly felt too easy. Catherine was not angry because she had been challenged personally. She was angry because her daughter had watched adults lose control across a table, where the child should have felt safe. Charles found Camilla alone later that day. She admitted something she had not said before. She had not realized Charlotte was crying until Catherine stood up. The king heard the regret immediately. Camilla told him that when she finally saw the child's face, the argument stopped feeling like a disagreement about royal responsibility and became something much uglier. She had frightened someone who had no part in the dispute. Charles did not rush to comfort her, because both of them knew regret could not erase what Charlotte had experienced. Camilla then made a decision that surprised him. She did not want Charles defending her to William. She did not want advisors shaping her words or courtiers carrying messages between households. Instead, she asked for one private meeting with Catherine, without excuses, and without anyone negotiating on her behalf. The king agreed to pass along only the request. Catherine considered it carefully. Then, she said yes. But the condition was absolute. Only the two women would be present, and Camilla would listen before she explained anything. The confrontation had happened before an entire family. The possible repair would happen behind a closed door, where neither woman could hide behind rank, husbands, or palace protocol. There were no aides, no husbands, and no children in the room when Catherine finally sat opposite Camilla. That absence changed everything. Neither woman could appeal to protocol, reputation, or someone else's interpretation of the Windsor dinner. Catherine spoke first, and she did not soften what Charlotte's tears had meant to her. Camilla listened. For once, the argument was stripped of royal status and reduced to something painfully ordinary. One mother demanding that another adult understand the effect her anger had on a child. Catherine had agreed to the meeting because she wanted resolution, not permanent hostility. But she entered with limits already fixed in her mind. Camilla understood that Charles could not bargain for her, and William would support only a reconciliation his wife truly believed was safe. Royal protocol, the set of formal rules and customs that guide how members of the monarchy behave, had no power inside this conversation. Catherine was not speaking as a future queen. She was speaking as Charlotte's mother, and that made every word harder to dismiss. Catherine told Camilla she could survive criticism aimed at herself. She could tolerate disagreement, tension, even anger. What she would not accept was her children becoming emotional collateral in conflicts between adults. The memory of Charlotte trying to hide her tears had changed the meaning of the entire argument. Catherine made clear that George, Charlotte, and Louis would not be drawn into battles about status, influence, or royal expectations. Camilla listened without interrupting, because she finally understood that defending her intentions would not erase the effect of her actions. Camilla apologized. She did not begin with excuses. The queen consort admitted that months of feeling excluded had built into resentment, and that she had lost perspective during the dinner. She had convinced herself that William and Catherine were pushing her away from decisions involving the younger royals, and frustration had overwhelmed judgment. Then she stopped. Catherine said nothing. The silence stretched until Camilla finally added the sentence that mattered most. She was ashamed Charlotte had seen her like that. Catherine softened, but she did not surrender the boundary. She accepted the apology, while making clear that forgiveness would depend on changed behavior, not careful words spoken after the damage. Camilla agreed that any future disagreement involving the children would be discussed privately with their parents, and never in front of them. For the first time since Windsor, both women had reached the same understanding. William supported Catherine's decision when she told him what had happened. The prince trusted her judgment and accepted that cautious forgiveness was stronger than forced peace. But before the family could settle into that fragile calm, another problem arrived. The Windsor incident had already escaped the palace walls. Inside the family, the first wound had begun to close. Outside Windsor, however, the image of Catherine ending a royal dinner over Charlotte's tears was about to take on a life of its own. By the time the family found a path toward reconciliation, Britain was already debating what the Windsor dinner represented. Some saw Catherine's decision as maternal courage. Others focused on Camilla's loss of control. But the most powerful reaction centered on Charlotte, a young princess caught inside an argument she never created. Suddenly, the monarchy's most private question had become public. Where should royal duty end when the emotional safety of a child begins? William saw the coverage and felt the private crisis changing shape. The prince had already chosen to shield Charlotte from the adult fallout, but now he faced a new fear, that she might eventually encounter dramatic versions of the story herself. Palace communications, meaning the official way royal staff manage public statements and responses, remained deliberately restrained. No detailed account of the argument was released. The message was simple. This was a family matter, and the family would handle it privately. That restraint mattered, because every extra detail risked turning Charlotte's distress into public entertainment. Camilla understood the danger too. The queen consort became a focus of criticism almost immediately, yet she refused to answer through friends, advisors, or carefully planted explanations. She knew any aggressive defense would weaken the apology she had already given Catherine. Silence now carried a different meaning. Earlier, it had felt like isolation. Now it became restraint. She accepted that the public might judge her harshly, and chose not to reopen the wound simply to protect herself. The reaction reached a peak the following morning. One newspaper appeared with the stark front-page words, "Catherine draws the line," turning a private maternal decision into a national symbol. Outside Windsor Castle, a crowd gathered and discussed the same question from different angles. But one message dominated. Many people saw Catherine's decision as a mother protecting her child before protecting appearances. The moment struck beyond royal circles because parents everywhere understood the instinct behind it. Catherine did not celebrate that response. She knew public approval could be as dangerous as public criticism when a child was involved. Still, the attention strengthened her image as someone willing to place her children ahead of royal performance. Camilla's refusal to fight back publicly prevented the story from growing into an open war between two royal households. Even William recognized that the silence had stopped the conflict from becoming something far uglier. One test remained. The family had apologized. Boundaries had been drawn. Public opinion had delivered its judgment. But Catherine needed something more important than headlines. She needed to know Charlotte could return to the same family room without fear. And until that happened, Windsor would not truly be healed. The Windsor dinner did not end with a constitutional crisis, a permanent exile, or a royal marriage collapsing. It ended with something quieter and more meaningful: boundaries. Catherine protected Charlotte. William stood beside them. Camilla faced what her anger had caused. Charles stopped trying to make the problem disappear and allowed the family to address it honestly. When they eventually gathered again, nobody pretended the tears had not happened. That honesty became the reason the family could finally move beyond them. Catherine agreed to a smaller family gathering only after enough time had passed for Charlotte to feel comfortable again. She also needed to see that Camilla had respected the limits set during their private conversation. The reconciliation was deliberately personal, not ceremonial. A royal ceremony, meaning a formal event shaped by tradition and public duty, would have turned the moment into performance. Catherine wanted the opposite. There would be no grand palace statement, no public celebration of unity, and no attempt to pretend one difficult evening had never happened. Camilla understood that this gathering was a test of behavior, not words. Before everyone fully settled, she approached Charlotte calmly and apologized for upsetting her at Windsor. The Queen Consort did not explain her frustration. She did not blame pressure, misunderstanding, or anyone else at the table. Charlotte listened, accepted the apology, and stayed close to her mother. Catherine watched without stepping in. That silence mattered. She was allowing her daughter to decide how the moment felt, rather than deciding for her. Catherine chose forgiveness, but not forgetfulness. She did not return to the relationship exactly as it had existed before. The Princess of Wales remained clear that George, Charlotte, and Louis would never become part of adult battles over status, influence, or royal duty. Camilla accepted that boundary because she now understood what ignoring it could cost. Trust had not magically returned. It had begun to rebuild through restraint. William later spoke privately with Charles. The prince listened, as his father admitted he should have intervened earlier, when tension between Catherine and Camilla first became serious. The king had hoped silence would calm the problem, but instead it allowed resentment to grow. William acknowledged something too. Accountability had worked better than permanent division. His family had been protected without turning one painful mistake into an endless war. The final change was simple but lasting. Any disagreement involving the Wales children would remain between adults, in private, and away from the children themselves. Catherine had made motherhood more important than etiquette. Camilla had accepted responsibility. Charles had learned that peace could not be commanded. William had shown what his future household would protect above all else. The dinner Catherine halted began as one of Windsor's darkest family evenings, but it ended by establishing something stronger than protocol. The crown may shape their duty, but when a child is hurting, family comes first. And on that point, the matter was finally settled. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.